teacher. My dad worked for councils. And then actually my background's in business. So I went to a pretty dreadful comprehensive school, but worked my way into a Fulbright scholarship at the Harvard Business School, came back in about 2000 when I started a family and started a business, and was very happily growing that. But I guess I'd had one of those experiences growing up that had made me pretty political and pretty interested in politics. And it was when I lost my mum, actually, to cancer when she was just 52, just a little bit older than me. She died on Boxing Day, 1997. And that was, one of those moments, I suppose, that you have in life when you realize that you're not here forever and you need to kind of crack on with the things that you think you're here to do. And so, not long after I'd started my business and we had 3 kids, and that's when I stood for Parliament. I was elected back in 2004. And because of the background I had in business, I got all the difficult jobs to do in politics. So there you go. That's life, isn't it?
But it wasn't long after you elected. A fairly meteoric rise through the ranks when you were elected. You were serving in government not long after your first election.
Yeah, I did. I was sort of put up into the cabinet within about 4 years of arriving in Parliament, but in a way that just reflects 2 things, I suppose. I mean, I serve a constituency where 5 generations of my family lived and worked in East Birmingham. My family's history, they were toolmakers and engineers back in the gun industry, back in East Birmingham. And we've always operated a very high touch model of politics in Hodge, which is how we built a majority of 460 into the biggest majority in the West Midlands. And you learn everything, basically in your constituency. So, but yeah, I suppose that background in business and just getting stuff done is what I became known for. I was the hard man of government. But I think taxpayers have got a right to expect people to go to work on their behalf and deliver things on their behalf. So sometimes that didn't make me very popular in politics, but we got good things like New Street Station built. That was my proudest achievement as a minister, I think. And I spent a bit of time running the Treasury for Alistair Darling. I ran number 10 for Gordon Brown during the financial crisis. So yeah, it was sort of one thing after another, basically.
You said you were from Liverpool. I mean, you said that explained your football. Are you a red or a blue?
I'm a red. Yeah, I'm a red. So after those kind of some of your listeners will be old enough to remember those kind of glory days in the 70s. And it's been nice to see a restoration after what's been a very long wait.
Well, I know that you have 1 or 2 friends here in Dudley who are also of that persuasion. So if you were to be elected, at least I know you have a warm welcome in some parts.
In some parts, exactly. Yeah.
Up the walls, anyway. Now, my colleague Dan, who's on the radio after 12, he came and asked, why does Liam want to be the mayor of the West Midlands when he's an MP?
Yeah, so it's a sad story in a way. Partly, the big answer, I suppose, is out of just sheer frustration. As an MP, you go to Westminster and you argue and you talk, and I'm not really a great talker. I'm more of a doer, and I just see things in our region, in my constituency, going from bad to worse, and I want to do something about it. And I think the mayor has got power and resources to change that. The crunch moment came a couple of years ago. So I've told this story a few times now, but one of the things that I kept secret for a long time was that I'm the child of an alcoholic. My dad basically plunged into an abyss of alcoholism after he lost the woman he loved, my mum, when she died so young. And my dad eventually died in 2015. Whatever we could do, we couldn't save him. And it was after that I started working with the homeless community in Birmingham. I thought in some ways I thought it would be cathartic, and of course it's not. It's just really, really difficult. But I met many people who were self-medicating trauma with drugs and alcohol in exactly the same way that my dad was. But it came to a morning, I was out with a church group in just by New Street Station, that underpass between Snow Hill and New Street, and we met a chap who'd he'd been there for 2 days. He was a double amputee. He was lying by his wheelchair, and this underpass, it stank of urine. He was crying out in agony. and he was still in his hospital gown with a hospital tag on his wrist. And for me, that was just the moment when I snapped. I just said, look, I'm not bringing up a family of 3 kids in a city where we've got homeless people in underpasses in hospital gowns. It's just not acceptable. And I suppose from that work, I began doing more work with our food banks and food bank systems like Black Country Food Bank, which do an incredible job. And I just see things going from bad to worse. And the coronavirus crisis is like all earthquakes, it's got aftershocks. And I think as a region now, we've got a choice about what kind of recovery we want. Are we going to become a region where actually we look after those who are very vulnerable, and we actually get a grip of our future economy, and we actually start becoming a leader again? That's above all what I want. I think the West Midlands is becoming overlooked now between London and the Northwest. And I think we need to start fighting our corner a little bit harder than we are today. So I suppose, I don't know if that answers the question really. I mean, it's a mixture of the kind of political and personal, I suppose.
I think the context is important. I was interested that you told your story there. I spent many years working with people who had alcohol difficulties, and the one thing that always struck me was everybody had a story.
Yeah,
it was always something that it wasn't that they just had a drink. There was something that came before that, and homelessness is something that you have been involved in over the last few years locally, and every single person who you come across on the street, like that gentleman who's still has a hospital tag on, they all have their story. There has been some real challenges for the government and for local authorities over the last 12 months, particularly around coronavirus for homeless. But what really do we need to do to change the situation that sees a country where people are on the streets and also have to use food banks?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. Everyone has got a story, but there's nothing in life that's so certain as uncertainty. And basically, what I found more and more is people have basically been hit by a twist of fate. It could have been anything, but that story has always said that twist of fate has always happened. And if you've not got family to pick you up, then you hit the pavement, basically. And of course, once you're on the pavement, it's pretty hard to get back off. But look, in terms of homelessness, I mean, there's 2 things we've got to do. We've got to start building more council houses. So the number of council homes we're building each year in the region has fallen by 82% since 2010. It's mad. In Walsall, there wasn't any single home built in the last year for which there's numbers for social rent. It's crackers. So we've got to start building a hell of a lot more homes for social rent. But Matt Lambert, who runs homelessness services up in Wolverhampton, has this great line, which is that we're not trying to get rid of houselessness, we're trying to get rid of homelessness. And a home, if you think about a home is where you have a wealth of relationships, people who cherish you, nurture you, and catch you when things go wrong. So you've actually got to knit together services, especially mental health and addiction services, in a new way. And if you do one thing and not the other, I don't think we'll solve the problem. So I think you've actually got to do both. And I think, to be fair, in the Black Country, I think some of the most innovative practice I've seen is in places like Wolverhampton. And this is the thing about the West Midlands. You've got, in parts of the region, you've got people who are doing incredible things. And if we basically just took those ideas and spread them out across the region, we would have a very different kind of region. Food banks are very similar. So Black Country Food Bank does incredible stuff. Some of the most amazing stuff I've seen is actually down in Coventry, where Trussell Trust have got their regional warehouse, but where they're now building social supermarkets, where they've really galvanized the supermarkets and charity funders, and they have really well organized things. But the truth is, you can't get rid of food shortages until people start getting better paid jobs. And at the moment, in parts of the Black Country, 30-40% of people are paid less than the real living wage. You imagine that. In Walsall, it's 40% of people. So unless we begin bending our economy to create the new jobs and then actually change the skill system to connect local people to those jobs, you're not going to get rid of the problem. And we might go on to talk about this, but I mean, I think it is time that we were a leader again. I'd like to see us as the capital of green manufacturing in Britain. We were the workshop of the world once. We led the industrial revolution in Dudley, as it happens. We should now lead the zero carbon revolution. And we can do that in a way that I think makes the electric vehicles, the zero carbon railways, the jet zeros of the future. Those are massive growth markets. We should be making this stuff here in the region. My great grandfather on my mum's side, he was Danish. He lost everything in the Russian Revolution, and He came to King's Norton actually during the First World War because he'd heard, if we can draw it, we can make it. That's our kind of ethos, that's our ethic. But now you've got this new industrial revolution coming. Well, let's lead it. That's what we do in this region. We make stuff, but let's do that in a way that creates jobs for local people, good, well-paid jobs, middle-class jobs. That's what I think we need to be doing. And I think we need to be, as I say, just punching a hell of a lot harder than we are today.
He obviously hasn't seen my drawing. Some of the things I'm not sure anybody would want to build.
I know, but you're an artist. You're
I'm something. James asks, Dudley has a program here in the borough to take homeless people off the streets in a matter of hours, but there are those that refuse the help and suggest it's actually nothing to do with the lack of homes. It is that people do not want to leave the streets.
Well, I've spent time with people in that predicament, and sometimes, we say that we have hard to reach services, or we have hard to reach people rather. Actually, hard to reach people just need different kinds of services. And sometimes where a public agency is not as persuasive perhaps as it could be, you've often got charities like Shelter who have got people who have had that lived experience of being homeless. And I've been out with some of their team who have been homeless for some time themselves, but they've now picked themselves up, got themselves together. And their effectiveness, their manner, their persuasive force is just extraordinary because they can tell it as it is. And so sometimes I think, we've got to be a little bit more sophisticated about who the front face of this work is, because sometimes, frankly, organisations like Shelter do a better job than, e.g., your local authority.
This is Black Country Week with Labour candidate for the West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor, Liam Byrne, and my co-presenter this morning, Eve Bennett. Good morning, Eve. We haven't heard much from you this morning.
Good morning.
Hey, morning.
Hi, Leo. It's Eve here. So moving on to another part, which I saw mentioned a lot on your website, and actually most recently that you'd met virtually with some of many West Midlands students. And obviously everybody's been hit really, really hard by this pandemic, but young people are going to be facing some of the longest term problems. And West Midlands is the youngest region. And I was just wondering what you sort of learned from those students, what their worries were, and what you think we need to do moving forward to solve some of those problems and anxieties.
Yeah, so we're the youngest region in Europe. I think we should be the best place in Europe to be young. But right now, we've had youth services that have been cut twice as hard as the national average. We've got apprenticeship numbers that in places like Dudley have collapsed by 1,500 over the last few years. In Birmingham, we've got youth unemployment now over 20%. We've got mental health services that are just not there. And what we heard this week from students is that they just basically feel like they've been abandoned. So they are obviously paying, over £9,000 in fees, thousands more in accommodation. Many of them are actually not allowed to go to the accommodation that they're paying for, which just feels completely wrong. Many people felt that they were just under a set of acute new pressures, real worries about the job market, real worries about learning, and they just didn't think the support was there. And I suppose what students said to us, and we've got 160,000 students in the region, so this is a big deal for us. But what those students basically said to us is that they'd felt abandoned because they didn't feel that government was saying to universities, right, we're in a crisis, these are the things that you need to be doing for your students. And I think there were probably three things that floated to the top. One was much better mental health services, which is an issue actually for young people generally, not just students. Second thing, we should be rebating the accommodation costs. It's wrong that people should be forking out for accommodation when they're not allowed in the region. But the other thing was careers education or careers guidance. So obviously young people, students in particular, are now, they've taken on all this debt, £50,000-£55,000 worth of debt, and they're confronting a jobs market that looks terrible. And so most students, practically all the students we heard from, did not have a good story to tell about career services. So I just think there's some practical things that we need to be doing. Now, going forward, I want to see youth workers back in every neighbourhood. I'm a big believer in youth work and youth services. I think we should be joining up our schools, colleges and universities in a programme to educate for the technical jobs that we've got for the future. We call it a Tomorrow's Engineers and Artists programme. And I just think, there's lots of people in the region who have got really clear ideas about things we need to be doing, but no one seems to be bringing them together to actually just sort of make stuff happen. So I'm actually quite optimistic that we can make a heck of a lot of progress, but we're certainly falling behind. We're certainly falling behind Manchester right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously students, I mean, as a student myself, I completely understand the plight that students are facing. But one group that I feel like does tend to be overlooked are young people who've decided not to go to university and not to follow that path. And it's actually National Apprenticeship Week this week. And you were saying that the region is facing real problems in respect to that. So what would you say to those people, and what is your plan for that group of people going forward?
So the numbers are terrible. I mean, we've been putting the numbers together ahead of next week. There has been a collapse in apprenticeship numbers by well over 5,000 across the Black Country. So that is 1,210 in Dudley. And the bad news is that this collapse happened before COVID. Now, it's gotten even worse over the last year. So I've spent quite a bit of time in Dudley College, which, I think is a template for what we should be doing better. But it's a really difficult situation. So what we need to be doing, the tragedy here is there's a massive underspend in the apprenticeship budget. So companies like Rolls-Royce or Jaguar Land Rover, they're paying a fortune into government, but the money is sitting there in Treasury, not doing anything. So I think we need to be saying to government, look, we want the apprenticeship levy back in our region. We need to be using that money so that colleges like Dudley College don't have to sack people. But then what we need to be doing is actually bringing together some of the big engineering firms, so your Rolls-Royces, Jaguar Land Rovers, some of your big construction firms as well. And we need to be getting a clear picture from them about how many jobs they are going to be creating in the next few years. And then we need to be bringing the schools and the colleges, and to a degree, some of the universities like Wolverhampton together to say, right, how do we create a pipeline of local people who can then fill those jobs of the future? So it's just a little bit more coordination and planning. And then there are some things that we can do to kickstart the job. So if we start building more homes, for example, that's construction jobs for us. Right now, we've got about 130 million in transport projects that are running late. Let's speed them up. That's more jobs. I've said that, the new bullet trains that are going to go on high speed too, why don't we build them in the Black Country like, we used to? So, there are things that we can do to actually bring forward big infrastructure projects that create jobs, but we'll only create those jobs if we've got the training system sorted out as well. So we did a roundtable with Annalisa Dodds actually yesterday, and one of the people from the automotive industry said things are now so bad. We now have a net zero skills gap. So for the zero carbon economy, we're already seeing skill shortages. This is mad. It's completely mad. So we just need to be joining things up in a completely different sort of way. I think it's not rocket science actually.
Absolutely. And my final question would actually just be looking at the elections themselves. I've never voted in a local election before, and I now am of voting age. So I'm sure there are lots and lots of people in the West Midlands, young people of voting age who've never sort of dabbled in local politics before. So what would your message be to them? Why should they vote, and why should they consider voting for you?
It's really simple. Things can be a heck of a lot better than they are right now, but you have to vote for it. So we've got a choice now about the kind of recovery that we have. Do we have a recovery that creates good industrial jobs, construction jobs, service sector jobs for local people, or do we just carry on just kind of making it up as we go along? So if you want a different kind of future, you've got to vote for it. Crucially, we're encouraging everyone to get a postal vote, because at the moment they're telling us you've got to take your own pencil to the polling station. We don't quite know what that is going to look like, but you can vote early, you can vote for free, and you can vote safely from home. You just got to apply for a postal vote. And when I do a lot of workshops with young people, because my constituency is one of the youngest in Britain, and lots of young people say, "Wow, we don't think we know enough to vote." Here's the secret: you'll never know enough. You'll never know enough. Sometimes you've just got to go with your gut instinct. But the key thing is to vote, because right now, basically, twice as many people over the age of 55 vote as under the age of 25. So if you want a region and a country that is good for young people, the first thing you've got to do is just get out there and vote.
One of the issues, Liam, sorry, it's Ian back again, is the turnouts for the mayor elections and the PCC elections have not been particularly high in the past. What would you say to people who are out there and perhaps don't see the relevance of the role of the West Midlands mayor?
I think about this quite a lot, but I think the message really is, if you think our interests are best looked after by London, so if you think the government in Westminster can sort things out for us and will sort things out for us, fine, leave it to them. If, like most people, you don't think that is a sensible thing to do, you have to vote. So at the moment, we shouldn't be prisoners of our modesty. We should be quite ambitious about the future. We could be one of the great global capitals of green manufacturing. That's the future. We're going green. Let's make our green future. So let's not be prisoners of our modesty, but let's also be masters of our own destiny. I came up through politics with Andy Burnham. I was in the cabinet with Andy Burnham. I think Andy's done a really good job at fighting the corner for Greater Manchester. And I think that's the kind of mayor that we need here, someone who is actually going to take the fight to Westminster and stop pulling our punches, basically. So I think, people have got a choice about what kind of leader they want, and people have got a choice about what kind of direction they want our region to go in. And I think after all the agony of loss and sacrifice that we've been through over the last year, I think we deserve something different, and I think we deserve something better.
You mentioned Andy Burnham, who's the mayor for Greater Manchester. Slightly different mayoralship up there. I think they have, Andy Burnham has control over the police, which is a PCC in the West Midlands. And also the Greater Manchester area has devolved health budgets as well. The West Midlands Combined Authority mayor, the role that you're putting yourself up for, it's only one of those three. Would you like to see the mayor of the West Midlands assume greater levels of responsibility?
I think the truth is there is enough to do with the role as it is today, because if the worst case scenario is that unemployment in the region goes up by 40% this year, that's the Bank of England's forecast. That is a catastrophe. That takes us back up to levels of unemployment, that we last saw in the 1980s. So I think there's a real focus on building that new kind of economy, putting in place an industrial plan, the jobs task force, the skill system, the energy investment, the house building, that we need to go green. I would like our region to be the first net zero carbon region in Britain, so mid-2030s. I think we can use that defining mission to transform our industrial base, but we've got to do that in a way that creates chances for young people. So to be honest with you, I think that is more than enough for one person to be cracking on with. The one exception, I think, is around mental health services, where I do think that mental health services, in particular for young people, are a disaster. And I think we should be working with the NHS quite closely to say, look, how can we build a different kind of front line for mental health services around our schools and our youth services? Because, a lot of people feel that the younger generation, they've had the rug pulled from under them right now. And there's a risk that they become the lost generation. And, and these guys are our future. They're incredible. They're so, like Eve, they're amazing. They're talented. They're at the cutting edge of social change. They're clever. They're smart, but they need the tools to succeed. I've got this old saying, which is talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And in large parts of our region, we need to be just giving our young people the tools they need to thrive and succeed for the future.
I'm going to just pass.
You can tell I'm the son of a teacher.
It may have made Eve blush a little bit, but Eve, if I could just, Liam's talking to you there. Do you hear the things that you want to hear from candidates in these elections?
Yeah, sadly not. I suppose because, as I was saying, that sometimes turnout among young people is quite low in these elections. And I suppose it kind of leads to like a bit of a vicious cycle of them not being the target of these campaigns. And especially at the moment, I would definitely agree that we do feel that we've had the rug pulled out from underneath us, and it can feel quite daunting, because not only is this going to impact our university experience, but like this is going to have a very, very long-term impact on us going down the line, going to the property market, job market, all of those things. So I suppose it's always nice to hear when people have got longer term plans for young people, not just addressing the short term problems that the pandemic is showing to them.
Liam, once upon a time, we were the future.
I know, but now we've got a responsibility to make sure that the region has a future, my friend.
Yeah, as Eve just sort of pointed out, we've had a difficult year. Let's be honest; it's had impacts across the whole of society. One of the impacts that has been acutely felt, particularly locally here, is the impact on small businesses, whether they're retail outlets, whether they're entertainment and leisure pubs. What will you give? What hope can you give? What optimism can you give to small businesses in the West Midlands, particularly the Black Country?
Something old-fashioned called sales. So, you know, I have started a business on a table like this with 2 people and grown it up to a multi-million-pound business. But I know what a roller coaster that is. I know what it's like to have to go home and explain to your other half that you're not going to get paid that month because you don't know if you're going to hit payroll. I know what it's like to argue with the tax man about when your PAYE should be paid. You know, I know what that roller coaster is like. So there's 2 things that we need to do for small business, in my view. So one is we need a package of tax breaks for the short term. So things like business rates, I think we should be giving some tax breaks to help people get through the next 3 to 6 months. But then what we need to be doing is we need to be making sure that the 15 to 16 billion pounds a year that is spent by the public sector in the region goes to businesses in the region. So I'll give you a silly example of what's going on at the moment. There's one of our hospitals that has a contract with Brake Brothers. What that entails is Brake Brothers making curry in Newcastle, sending it down a motorway into Birmingham. Brake Brothers is registered in a tax haven. And you sort of think, why are we paying big companies to bring in things from outside and then launder the profits in a tax haven? Wouldn't it make more sense if we broke some of those contracts up and gave them to local small businesses? So we think that we need something like the American Small Business Administration to basically get a grip of the contracts that we have here and actually start running those contracts through the supply chains locally. This is a technique. This is not my idea, by the way. I'm a great believer in stealing good ideas from others. This is actually an idea that's been tested in Preston. They call it community wealth building there. It's a bit of jargon, but it's worked incredibly well in Preston. Preston's a small place. West Midlands is a big place, but I think we can make this work at the scale of the West Midlands. And I think it would just transform the revenue and sales pipelines of a lot of our local small businesses. And what they need right now is hope and certainty. They need certainty in the short term, but they need some hope of growth in the medium term. So again, it's not rocket science. It's been done in different places in Britain and around the world. Let's do it here. Let's try it. Can't hurt.
Yeah, I've heard a lot mentioned of the Preston model.
Yeah.
And this is really about trying to, in this case from Preston, the council, bringing in partners, collaborative working, a lot of that. I was a local councillor in Dudley, and what I often found was there are whole loads of people doing wonderful things, truly beautiful things to help their community, to make their communities better. And there was a whole lot of people doing the same things over, and it's almost in competition with each other. Yeah. Do you think this sort of interconnectedness that we need between sort of the community groups, the third sector and private sector and local authorities, is that something that the combined authority could be managing and working?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I ran the Treasury, one of the agencies that reported to me was the Office of Government Commerce. And what does that mean? Basically, it was the organisation that looked after public procurement, government contracting. Now, think about some of the big ticket items that are coming into the regions. Think about High Speed 2, or the Commonwealth Games, or the NHS, or our local councils. Billions and billions of pounds. But at the moment, those contracts are scattered across loads of different websites. I met the Chief Executive of High Speed 2 yesterday to talk about this. And, you know, they're doing their best. They're about to launch a portal actually in the next week or two that has got business opportunities across their supply line. But why can't we make it easy for people? So why can't we put all of the contracts available in one place and actually go out to businesses to actually explain some of the things that they need to do, right now, we sort of expect our small business leaders to be psychic. We expect them to kind of just know intuitively what it is that they need to do to win these contracts. That's bonkers. They don't do it like that in Germany. They don't do it like that in France. They actually get the people with the contracts together with the people who need the business. And I just think we could be doing so much more of that. Again, it's not rocket science, but somehow we've lost our way on this.
I mean, thank you for your time this morning. We are coming towards the end, and there's just a couple of things that I want to cover. One will be, we always ask our second hour guests to choose a song. You have chosen a beautiful song, and we'll talk a little bit about why you've chose that song shortly. But this is basically your last pitch to electors on this show. I'm sure you'll make other pitches. But in terms of, why would the people of the Black Country vote for Liam Byrne as Mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority?
Because what we're going to do is three things. We're going to make our region the capital of green manufacturing. We're going to restore the pride that created our place all those years ago. We're going to be a leader of the green manufacturing revolution. We're going to do that in a way that creates new chances for our young people. And we're going to do this on a foundation of a richer community life. We love the fact that we're a diverse place, but sometimes we live in our own worlds. We should be using culture, sport, festivals and markets to bring people together so that actually that community life that we're proud of is richer and stronger. Because if we've learned one thing this year, it's that communities that look out for each other are safer and stronger. It's really simple. Green manufacturing, chances for young people, richer community life. If you like that, you've got to vote for it. You've got to vote for it in May.
And just very quick before we get on to the song, clearly it's going to have to be a different election. It was already challenging for someone like yourself to campaign across the whole of the West Midlands as a single. It's a little bit difficult now, harder now with sort of social distancing and leafleting restrictions.
It is. I mean, we've written hundreds of thousands of letters to people. I'm about to start doing online meetings in every community because we genuinely want our manifesto to be a people's plan. The manifesto we put together is not the wild ideas of Liam Byrne. It's actually the things that we in the region, people in the region, think should be prioritised. Again, this was the way Andy Burnham went around writing his manifesto, and I've just stolen the idea from him. It worked for him. I think it can work for us.
I have nothing wrong with creative borrowing.
Creative borrowing. I should borrow that phrase.
So you've chosen a song, and a gorgeous song it is too. So tell us a little bit about the song and why you've chosen it.
So this is A Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong, and I'm very blessed as a dad of three incredible kids and music educator. I'm very unmusical, but they are incredible musicians. And my daughter basically trained on the trumpet with the Birmingham training wind band. Incredible organisation, and my eldest son is an extraordinary pianist. And together they put together this song for my wife's 50th birthday last year. She couldn't have a 50th birthday because of lockdown, and so we've got a few of her friends on Zoom, and we got a few of her friends in the street, socially distanced, and the kids put on this incredible story. And when you watch your kids just do amazing things, it obviously just sort of brings extraordinary tears to your eyes. And, in the middle of lockdown, it was just the kind of beam of hope that we all needed. So that's why we've got this one today.
You may as well take my seats, introduce this song.
Well, this is, I think now we're beginning to look ahead for what I hope will be a sunnier year. Despite, all the love and loss that we've had over the last year, I think it's important to remember that it is a wonderful world. And here is one of the greatest artists in the world. Let that out for us.